Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Efrat. Welcome to everyone who's listening. We are proceeding into Sefer Bamidbar. We are now at we're at Parshat Behaalotecha. So this week's Parsha has many interesting components to it. From the beginning, which is the candle, the menorah. Then we have the various complaints that are broken up by the Vayihi bin Saron, the upside down nuns in the Parsha, in the Sefer Torah. And then we have the famous complaint of the man, that it's too boring and bland. And then we have the story of Moshe saying that the burden is too great, which I think, even though I have never seen it yet, but I believe it's the beginning of the complaint. Moshe kind of buckles under the pressure a little bit. I'm not saying something negative, but I think he realizes that it's too hard for him for one person. And he says that... So then he says, he foreshadows, because we know that at the beginning of... in Devarim, he says, like, how am I going to do this myself? And in this week's Parsha, he already mentioned something like that, saying, "Do you expect me to carry this all by myself already?" So I think there's a little bit of foreshadowing already to that idea of, it's hard for me as one leader, even though it's also, I think the component is that Moshe is trying to say is that it's slowing down. I don't know if that negatively, but there's some sort of realization. Anyway, either way, at the end of this week's Barmash, the last few psukim of this week's Parsha is the famous story where Aaron and Miriam talk about Moshe, and Miriam gets tzarat. There's a huge conversation between Hashem, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, and out of kavod to Moshe, Hashem speaks to Aaron and Miriam privately, and Miriam is the one who's played with tzarat. Why that is, not for this year. But at the end of this week's parsha, Moshe davens and is told to davens for Miriam, and what is known as the shortest davening, the shortest tefillah, for one individual in all of Tanakh, if I'm not mistaken. It's 5 words, and here the Zera Shimshon picks up on a very unique aspect of the entire tefillah, and he also mentions as it's broken into 3 sections. But it's really one big idea. So we're going to talk. It's Drush Zayin, the last Drush in Parshat Behaalotecha, and we'll go start with it right where Moshe responds. The pasuk. Let me get a chumash because I think it's important to read it. Hold on.
Why don't you sit down?
Okay.
Bring a chumash.
So the chumash, yeah. So the psukim read that right here. So the psukim read. Yep.
Good job.
Thank you. So the psukim read. So it's important just to understand what we're saying. Parak Yud Bet Pasuk Yud Gimel. So it says, "Vayicharaf Hashem bam vayilach." Hashem gets angry. And he left. I don't know what he left means. He leaves the meeting that he had with Aaron and Miriam, and he says, "V'hanan sar me'al oil v'nei Miriam etzorat kashalig, v'yifen Aaron and Miriam v'nei etzorat." So the cloud, the anan kavod, leaves the oil. Miriam has tzarat, and Aaron turns around and sees that she has tzarat. V'yomer Aaron al Moshe bi'aduni al na tashet alenu chatat asher no'alnu v'asher chatanu. Hebrew, in English, it says, Aaron says to Moshe, please do not let us, don't cast a sin about it, for we were foolish for we said this. Actually, we say this on Rosh Hashanah, Asher No'alnu Asher Chatanu, Al Nat Kamet, right? Don't let her be like a mate. This is where we learn that tzarat, the person who has tzarat is like a mate, is like a dead person. Asher B'tzeto Merechim Imo V'yachel Chatzi B'saro, right? Like one who leaves his mother's womb with half his body missing, meaning don't let her don't let her die. And then it says, "Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem limor el na refana la." So even the pasuk itself, it says Moshe cried out to Hashem, saying, "Please God, heal her now." So that the psukim, the art scroll, the English translation already kind of, and as well as the ta'amim in a little bit, the ta'amim kind of break up the pasuk in one way. The Art Scroll already implies certain things about about how to understand the psukim. The Zera Shimshon is going to go through a different component of it. But what's important to note, besides just the understanding of the English, is that in this parsha, in this pasuk, pasuk Yud Gimel, we'll notice something very different. Rashi usually goes in order of the psukim, of the pasuk, meaning he'll explain each part of the pasuk based on the order the pasuk is mentioned, in the order of the words of psukim. In this pasuk Yud Gimel, it says El Na Refan Allah first, even though that comes after the next drush that he does is Lemor. The Lemor comes first in the order of the pasuk, but it comes second in the order of Rashi, and that's something the Zera Shimshon is going to pick up on. So now we're going to do drush Zayin. It says Vayitzak Moshe El Hashem Lemor. We're on page 223 in the Art Scroll version, and in the Hebrew one, we're in the plain Hebrew one, not the Mivoar one, is Daf Resh Teyet Vav. So he said at the bottom of the page there. So it says Vayitzak Moshe El Hashem Lemor and El Na Rafan Allah. Uferesh Rashi El Na Ba Katuv Lam Lecha Derech Eretz HaShoel Daver Mechavero Tzarich Lomar Shnei O Shnayim V'Shlosha Divrei Tachnunim V'Achar Kach Yifaresh Elotav. So Rashi on this El Na Rafan on El Na, sure enough, he says that the pasuk is come to teach us that when you're asking something from a friend, you can't just make the request right away. You've got to introduce the request in some way, as it says, some sort of v'achar kach yifresh shalotav. So he's and then the pasuk. Then Rashi continues lemor. Ma tamud lomar lemor. Why does the pasuk say lemor at all? Hashivenu imata merapeota imlav ad sheshivo yarak. So the Rashi says that the word lemor was coming to teach us that Moshe was asking Hashem, tell me whether you're going to answer my tefillah or not, and whether you're going to actually heal Miriam. So of course there are questions that we can ask right away, but we'll the questions that we may have or might have thought of right away based on the understanding of how the psukim are reading and how Rashi used them. Zera Shimshon asks those questions, and we'll answer them as we go through the drush. So as I mentioned earlier, if you look in the Rashi says first he explains El Na Refan Allah, and then he explains the words Lemor. So the question is why? Why would the Rashi do that? That's not his normal style to start playing around with the order of the pasuk, right? If the pasuk reads one way, he explains that way, instead of trying to start moving around. So there's obviously a reason that he's going away from his normal course of action. There must be a reason for it. Right? Rashi should have first explained the word lemor. So he says that's what he should have done, but he didn't, and so therefore we have to understand what that is. So he says we have to understand that if we look at the pasuk, it seems to contradict the end of the pasuk. Because when we read the pasuk, El Na Vayitzak Moshe El Hashem Limor, Moshe screams out to Hashem saying, El Na Refan Na La. Right. So the pasuk it says the El Na at the end of the verse, in fact, is not please God, but rather now. Meaning El Na, the first El Na is please, right? But rather now, the second Na that comes up, it says El Na Refan Na. Right? So the question is, why do we have to say the word Na twice? So he's saying El Na, God, please. Na, the second Na means now. I mean, do it right away. Right? But if I'm saying, it means that Moshe repeated himself to make sure that the pasuk, that the tefillah is answered immediately. Right? By which means he's saying how critical the right. Oh, when you say please God, this is what he means to say here. He means when you say please God, do it now. If I wanted to do something now, I don't want to keep on adding words. I just want to say now, like just get it done. So he's saying like Vayitzak Hashem El Moshe Lemor. The Lemor is like the slow kind of like he makes an introduction. He does this whole thing, and now he's saying El Na Refan Allah, get it done now. It doesn't make sense. He seems like there's some sort of kind of the beginning of the pasuk and the end of the pasuk, and he's going to go through it a little bit more, even a little further. So he says, Hashem, Moshe wants Hashem to carry out his request now, at the very moment, without any hesitation. We know in the Gemara says, Shana Allah v'katuv la'akev, meaning when a pasuk repeats words, it comes to teach us la'akev, that you can't be skipping. Kahu, that we say elsewhere, anyone who exerts himself and puts out extra energy in his tefillah, he's guaranteed that he's guaranteed that his tefillah will not be unanswered. The meaning that the Moshe davened with such kavana, his tefillah was with such a kavana that it could not be ignored and was sure to be answered. Right? If Moshe was davening with such kavana, and he was asking for Hashem to do it right now, and he really wanted, and he says el na refana, repeats the word na, meaning that he wants it now, then the word lemor, right, which Hashem to tell him whether or not he should. Why Rashi says lemor means Moshe says to Hashem, are you going to actually let me know, Hashem, let me know whether you're going to actually heal her or not, right? If my tefillah is so powerful that I'm saying Hashem, do it right now, and it was Moshe Rabbeinu davening at that level of kavanah, then saying lemor, asking the question, well, I want to know whether you're going to answer my question or not, or whether you're going to heal her or not, is contradictory to the statement of do it right now, right? One is I'm not sure. One is now, right? So when I say that, there's a difference in the words, and the one contradicts the other. Understood? Okay. Yeah. Right? What is it possible that Moshe would tell? What would Hashem answer? What's Hashem going to say? Right? What can Hashem say to Moshe now? Shalom. Right? Wasn't Moshe's tefillah that he wants Hashem to heal Miriam immediately, and that his prayer be, was not his prayer. Meaning that the fact that he said el na refana, the fact that he stressed it over and repeated it, shows how important his tefillah is and how much he wants it. Meaning, if so, then there's no reason for Moshe, to say anything. Meaning, how do we understand the fact that the beginning of the pasuk says Hashem, I want to know whether you're going to answer me or not, and the second part is saying do it right now. When I say do something, do it right now, I don't have time to say, let me hear your thoughts on the point, right? Like, I need to get an answer now. I'll give you a good example. Very good example. Very, very good example. Right? We have one of my daughters is, we're going on a vacation soon, and we need to get vaccines, right? And so for whatever reason, one of my daughters, there's a lot of everyone has their own schedule, so my daughter was not able to, she was not able to get an appointment for whatever reason. We finally got her an appointment, and then she got there, and the appointment was, they forgot to tell us that day they're doing shipputzim in that building, and so the building is closed. So now she's stuck where she doesn't have an appointment, and she's stuck. So what do we do? So I said, well, let's call someone that we know that can help us out. And I said, I need an answer now. I need to know now whether she said, the place that was closed, they said come back on Friday. So I said, call the place, because they said, okay. So she went, she left. Then I said, but call them back and say, will you be open on Friday? And they said, yeah, we'll be open. So she gets a call today saying, oh yeah, we don't have the medication. Meaning tomorrow, they don't want to have the vacation. Had they not called, she would have showed up there and been more frustrated. So then I called someone else and I said, okay, we need an appointment right now. We need an appointment for Sunday, right now, right now. I don't have time to start giving you the whole story. I told my friend who was the contact there, I said, I don't have time to explain. Just make sure I have an appointment on Sunday, right? So I want the answer now. Like, give me the appointment. Whatever time you tell me, I'll be there on Sunday, right? So the same thing here. Moshe has no time he doesn't want to start. Hashem doesn't have time to answer. He's got to first deal with healing her. Then we'll worry about, the whole back and forth, whatever. Like, when you have a situation, sometimes the first thing you have to do is just solve the problem, and then we'll worry about, are you going to tell me this? Or what is Hashem going to say? Like, what could Hashem add to it? Say, no, I'm not going to. Yes, I'm going to. Whatever. What are you going to say? So, Ivrit?
It's fine.
Okay. We're in Drush Zayin. Yes, Shulim, Timothy, what's that?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. You don't need to bother.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, we're in Drush Zayin. So the question is. So the question is, why would you say the beginning of the pasuk says, "Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem lemor." Lemor, he's saying something he wants to, and the lemor, according to Rashi, is that he's asking Hashem, "Will you actually heal Miriam or not?" And then the second part is El na refana la. El na refana la. The repeating of the word na shows us that Moshe wants it to be done right now. And if that's the case, if he wants it done right now, what is Hashem going to answer? What's the lemor? The lemor seems to as they say in good Gemara language, tarte desakri, meaning it's contradictory to what you want. So now the question is why?
It sounds like he's leading towards a relationship sort of Torah.
They're going to get to something very close to that, actually.
Yeah.
So we say, so there must be something else in the word lemor that we haven't understood yet. So he says like this. So according to this, that we know that Rashi in the beginning, the El Narafan Allah, which Rashi asks about, Rashi says that the tefillah, in order to make a request, Amiga tefillah, you have to first introduce the tefillah. Right? So there has to be something that we have to now understand that he's going to say is maybe Moshe's tefillah was not introduced correctly. So now we're going to say it's like this. So he goes like this. He goes, L'chein tzarich lomar demilat el na eino rotze lomar miyad b'sha'azo kumo refana. Right? So we have to understand that there's a distinction between the two parts of the pasuk. Even though the pasuk reads, and most of us read the tefillah as el na refana la. Right? It's 5 words. El na refana la. So that's 5 words. We all think that it's one tefillah. The Zera Shimshon says no. El na is the introduction. Dear God. It's like what I would write, like dear whatever. I would say dear God, so that's el na. That's the first part. Comma. Take a broad breath, deep breath. Refan Allah. Refan Allah is the actual tefillah. And that's why the na and the na are not they're not connected. The first na is just to say, please. Right? And even if you look at it, now you can understand why ArtScroll does the way he does. Usually, if you would say the same word twice in a pasuk, ArtScroll should translate it as the same time twice. And here ArtScroll says, please God, please. And in fact, here he does it. In the English it says, please, comma, God, comma, heal her now. Right? But na, if we're saying na twice in the same pasuk, you would think that they were translated the same both times. Right? So even they understand that there's something here. So the Zera Shimshon says, is miyad b'sha'azo. And right, Kamo Rafana, as he meant it, when he said Rafana, means the second time, it's used in two different contexts. The first na is to say, please God, right? Like we say na, right? Bakasha, na is a lashon request, please God. And the second time, Rafana is the second time, Ela shehu lashon tachanun. That's the lashon tachanun. That's the lashon of request. That's mamash the bakasha. Okay, Kamo Ana, like the word, what we say, Ana, please. Ve'en kan lo kefel, right? It's not repetitious. Even though we think it is, there's a repetition. Velo chizuk b'tfilah zo, and there's really no chizuk. Meaning, what happens is that his tefillah was refan Allah, and which elna, the introduction it's not strong enough. In other words, his tefillah was not introduced properly enough, and that's why you have to say it's missing something. Now he's going to say, that's why he say, when we understand it needs to say the 2 or 3 words beforehand, and only afterwards to request. And that's why we say, look what he says, El na, 2 words, Rifan Allah, the 3 words that he says afterwards, that's the request. He introduces his statement, that's what Rashi was telling us. And that's why he goes out of his order. He goes out of his order to tell us, this is the order of Tefillah. El na Rifan Allah. Rashi never goes out of his order of ordering the pasuk. But here he says, you have to learn something about Tefillah. El na is the introduction, please God. Then I can tell you what I want. Right? You can't just go in there and say, I need money. You got to say, Hashem, thank you so much for everything we have. I'm so blessed for everything. Then you could say, we're going through a tough time. I need some more. I saw an interview recently. I forgot some video where they interviewed someone who was in the tunnels. It was a hostage. And they said, what did you do all day? What did you do all day? He said, the thing that saved me was tefillah. He didn't look religious to me, at least in again, maybe I'm being very judgmental, but he didn't look religious. And he said, so the person asked him, what did you daven for?
In those types of situations, if you permit, is even people who say I'm an atheist would...
Yes, there's a famous statement in English called, there's no such thing as an atheist in the foxhole. That was used in the time of the World War II when the people were in the bunkers.
Right.
There's no such thing as an atheist when bombs are coming.
Atheist, if you call him and say, hey, your mom is in the hospital, please, Hashem.
Right. So that's what he said. He was saying this. He said, what got you through the day? And the hostage, or the former hostage said, I don't remember who it was, the former hostage said, is every tefillah of every day started the same way. Thank you, Hashem. A person is sitting in the tunnels in Gaza, he's saying, thank you, Hashem. And then he said 10 minutes of just thank yous. I'm alive. I know there are people out there waiting for me. I have some sort of food. I can understand. 10 minutes, he said, I would just thank you, whatever I could say thank you for. And then, he would say, then I'd break down. Then I'd break down and really give it to him. Hashem say, make the request. Right, exactly. Like you have to make your introductory statement first. You can't go in there saying, hey, I need something right now. Of course we all want the same things. But we need to, in order to make that statement, you have to really bring it first. And that's what he's saying here. That in order for the word lemor, and for us to understand, it means to tell us, to make any sense, elna cannot mean Hashem now, rather it means please Hashem. In which case Moshe had prayed daven only once. The real tefillah was Rafan Allah. Elna was just an introduction. And since he did not repeat himself and didn't really strengthen his tefillah the way he should have, if I really wanted something to be urgent, Rafan Allah is not enough of a tefillah. Right? If you really want, we think that now is repeated twice, and therefore it sounds like it's, we really want it now. But it's not. It was Elna was like, dear God, or please God, as we saw.
It's like a bakasha, a request.
Right, exactly. And that's not a strong enough tefillah to make it happen urgent.
What would be an example of a strong tefillah? Do you have any?
It would say if you would say is Rafana la achshab miyad, right now, going on.
Like say for Devarim in Veschanan, it says that Hashem wouldn't let Moshe daven anymore because Veschanan was such a strong. Like it was too much tefillah.
Right. So that, but again, right.
יש.
אם הוא ישתתף הוא...
לא צריך להשתתף, אתה עובד קשה, אפשר לאכול את זה. Anyway, so... כן, בסדר. Anyway, so he says...
שם מבין.
Right, לפי... אתה יכול לעבור לעברית אם אתה רוצה.
One of the reasons there was a funeral tonight, that's one of the reasons a lot of people got it.
אני לא רוצה כי איך קוראים לו
מי?
לא, אולי מישהו שיבוא...
לא. יש funeral?
No, he wants to speak Hebrew. He wants me to speak Hebrew. Right? He wants me to turn to Hebrew.
Turn to Hebrew? למה לא?
Okay, so I'll do a little... what I'll do is, I'll finish in English.
יש שיר גם בעברית, אבל לא פה.
I'm going to finish this in English, and then I'll switch to Hebrew switch to Hebrew to just explain the whole idea quickly in Hebrew. Anyways,
I told him because you told me.
So he said the feature milat lemor, since the word is lemor, means that it's to tell us. What did you say? Nachrachat perusah means that it proves that the explanation of el nar means please God, right? Mishum hachi ikdim lefarish el nar, meaning that Rashi. So now I'll switch to English quickly. Rashi therefore explains first el na to explain to that is an introductory statement, and only afterwards does he explain lemor. Only afterwards he say that because means that Moshe asked Hashem to tell him whether or not he would be nevertheless answer because his tefillah was not as strong. So now I'm going to switch to Hebrew just to make a quick a switch just to explain. As השאלה היא ככה, בסוף הפרשה כתוב, ויצעק משה אל השם לאמור אל נא רפא לה. זאת אומרת, מרים מקבלת עונש על זה שהיא דיברה לשון הרע אל אהרון, והשאלה מה על משה, זאת אומרת על משה, מצטער, כי מקבלת צרעת, מה העונש? היא מקבלת צרעת, ומשה מתפלל בקשה אל נא, פסוק אומר, ויצעק אל השם לאמור אל נא רפא לה. אז רוב המפרשים אומרים אל נא רפא לה, זה התפילה. השאלה היא, זה לא יכול להיות. אז זה לפי זרה שמשון, זה הספר. רש"י, קודם כל נתחיל ברש"י. רש"י כותב, הוא מפרש את הפירוש, הוא קודם מפרש את המילים אל נא רפא לה, ואחרי זה הוא מפרש את המילה לאמור. אבל בסדר של הפסוק זה הפוך. ויצעק משה אל השם לאמור, ואז אל נא רפא לה. אז השאלה למה רש"י הופך את הפסוק, את הפירוש שלו, כדי, זאת אומרת שהוא הופך את הגדר של כאילו הכיוון הרגיל שלו זה לעשות לפי הסדר של הפסוק. אז אם הוא יוצא מהגדר של הסדר שלו הרגיל, יש סיבה. אז מה הסיבה? אז זרה שמשון שואל, קודם כל צריכים להבין מה זה, למה כתוב, למה רש"י הופך את הסדר, וגם כן, זה נשמע כאילו שמשה אומר, אל נא רפא לה, זאת אומרת שנא מופיע פעמיים. ואם נא מופיע פעמיים, זה נשמע כאילו הוא רוצה משהו עכשיו. כאילו לפי הגמרא אומרת בפסחים וגם בזבחים, שנע, כל מילה שכתוב פעמיים בפסוק, זאת אומרת שיש איזו חוזקה במילה. לדוגמה, אשום אשם, כל מילה אחרת שמכפיל את עצמו בפסוק, אז ברגע שיש כפל משון בפסוק, כפל מילה בפסוק, זאת אומרת שזה משהו מעקר. זה הגמרא אומר. אז השאלה היא, ואם באמת משה רצה משהו כל כך באופן ישיר ומיידי, אז מה המילה לאמור? לאמור, רש"י מפרש, רש"י אומר לפי המדרש, על פי המדרש הוא אומר, שהוא שואל את השם, השם תגיד לי אם אתה מרפא את מרים או לא. ככה אני יודע, זה מה שהמדרש אומר. רש"י רק מביא את המדרש. השאלה היא, אם אתה מתחיל בשאלות, אם אתה רוצה משהו עכשיו, אתה לא מתחיל בשאלות. כאילו, או זה או זה. כאילו זה נשמע שהתחלת הפסוק וסוף הפסוק מתנגדים, מאוד מסתדרים. אז זרע שמשון ממשיך ואומר, אל נא שאנחנו רובנו חושבים שאל נא רפא נא זה הפסוק, זה כל התפילה, זה לא נכון. אל נא הראשון, האל נא זה כאילו להגיד בבקשה השם. ואז זה כמו להגיד אנא, כמו שאנחנו אומרים אנא. ואז הוא אומר רפא נא לה, זה התפילה עצמה, רפא נא לה. רוב האנשים, האמת היא שאתמול, לפני יומיים שמעתי שיעור, שהוא אומר, זה התפילה הכי קצרה, זה תפילה של 5 מילים, אל נא רפא נא לה. אז כמובן שזה לא נכון, זה יותר מזה, 3 מילים. אל נא זה כאילו להגיד, כשהוא צריך, כמו רש"י אומר, אל נא רפא נא לה, הוא אומר, זה מלמד אותנו שכדי לבקש משהו צריכים להקדים את הבקשה עם כמה מילים טובות, ואז אתה יכול להיכנס. אתה לא נכנס מיד ואומר עכשיו. אתה אומר קודם כל להגיד לו תודה, להגיד משהו, ואז, אז מה שאמרתי שהיה לפני יומיים ראיתי באיזה סרטון שראיינו איזשהו חטוף שחזר, ושאלו אותו, מה עשית כל היום? מה עשית? הוא אמר, התפללתי. לא בן אדם דתי, הוא אמר, התפללתי. אז מה התפילה? מה אמרת? הוא אמר, קודם התחלתי עם התודות. אמרתי להשם 10 דקות, 20 דקות של תודה. תודה על זה, תודה על זה, תודה שאני חי, תודה ששמתי אותה, מה שלא יהיה. ואז הוא אמר, ואז פירקתי. ואז אני כאילו התחלתי את הבקשות. אז מכאן זה אותו דבר. אז זרע שמשון אומר שהאל הראשון היה כדי להקדים את התפילה, כאילו להתחיל את התפילה, להקדים את הבקשה, ואז הרפא נא זה התפילה עצמה, ולכן הנא, למרות שזה מופיע פעמיים, הנא זה לא מכפיל את עצמו, אלא זה יש שני לשון של נא, יש נא בבקשה, ויש נא עכשיו.
בדיוק, אבל זה גם מכריע את הקושייה של הדחיפות, וגם מכריע את הקושייה שהתוכן זה רפא נא לה.
כן. אז זהו, אז השאלה...
הרשע והסייפה, וזה משלים, אתה יכול להגיד ש5 מילים זה גם התפילה.
נכון, אז הנה, מה שרש"י אומר, מצטער, זרע שמשון אומר שהלאמור, למה, הלאמור זה להגיד,
אמירה רכה, כן.
אמירה רכה. אז השאלה היא, מה האמירה רכה? אם הוא באמת אמירה רכה, אז רש"י היה צריך להגיד את זה קודם. למה הוא עושה את זה אחר כך? קודם כל הוא רוצה להגיד לנו שהאל נא רפא נא לה, שאנחנו חושבים שזו תפילה אחת, אומר לנו שדרך ארץ צריכים לחזק את התפילה. אז התפילה קודם כל צריכה להיות באיזשהו אופן, יש לזה איזשהו מבנה. המבנה של משה היה נכון, אבל לא מספיק נכון. אם הוא באמת רצה את זה עכשיו, הוא היה צריך להגיד, אל נא רפא נא לה עכשיו, מיד, כאילו משהו אחר.
אבל הנא הוא משמש כעכשיו וכבקשת
נכון, אז זהו, ואז הלאמור, למה רש"י מפרש את הלאמור אחר כך? הוא אומר, אחר כך הוא רוצה, עכשיו אני יכול להבין שאולי התפילה של משה, אולי לא הייתה במרכאות לא קודם. זה השאלה.
זה תפילה, זה בקשה, זה לא, אתה לא מצווה על הקדוש ברוך הוא.
נכון.
נכון. אתה אומר נא, זה לאמור.
נכון, הנה, אז זה הדבר הראשון. עכשיו, הנה, עכשיו יש עוד שאלה, עכשיו נחזור, can I go back to English or it's okay?
You want to go back to English?
Whatever you want. Go back to English. Okay, I'm going back to English.
I'm going to stop the recording and we're going to upload the next part to
Okay.
give it a bit clearer, high quality.
אוקיי, עכשיו אני חוזר לאנגלית,
אולי
מצטער.
רש"י רוצה להגיד לנו, שלא תחשוב שבגלל שהוא אמר פעמיים נא, אל נא רפא נא לה, שלא תחשוב שהוא דיבר כלפי שמיים בהתרסה.
נכון, זה מה שהוא בדיוק, נכון, נכון.
שהוא אומר, אז בגלל זה הוא אומר אחרי זה לאמור.
נכון, אז נכון, בדיוק. זה חייב להיות ככה, אחרת יש לנו בעיה. אחרת זה נשמע שכאילו, בהתחלה יש לנו בעיה שהוא שואל שאלה על השם, כאילו הוא אומר, תגיד לי, כאילו, כן או לא?
ואולי יש להבין גם שלפי רמת האמונה של משה, שהכל כבר נמצא עוד לפני שאתה רואה בעיניים,
נכון.
הלאמור זה אפילו תודה תוך כדי, למה? ויאמרו לאמור, השיר על השם כי גאו.
נכון, נכון, יכול להיות. זה לא מופיע כאן, אבל יכול להיות באמת. אוקיי, עכשיו אני חוזר לאנגלית. רק ליתר So, yeah, okay, so next part. So now there's another, Zera Shimshon נותן עוד כמה פירושים. I'm going to go back to English. Okay, it says, you ready?
I'm just getting it ready, so. Okay. That's one of the. Okay, I'll just do it. Okay.
Okay, so he says, Inam yesh lomar. So the second approach to this whole idea is the kashel Moshe makam lemor. Why would Moshe tell Hashem, like, right? How could Moshe have the chutzpah to say, let me know if you're going to answer my tefillah or not? Now, no one. Dainu hashivenu al dvarei imatam rapeh v'chizo midat derech eretz shakadosh baruch hu yashiv la'adam im yekabel tefilatav im lo v'yesh lomar. So the question. Sorry, I'm going back between Hebrew and English. The question is, how could it be that Moshe would ask such a question of Hashem whether he was actually going to heal Miriam or not? It's not derech eretz to anyone, but it's definitely not midat derech eretz to Hashem. Right? There's a definitely level of quote unquote chutzpah, which is what you said. But you're right. So anyways, yesh makshim. There are those who ask, Moshe b'tfilato. Right? How could it be that Moshe cried out? It says, as the pasuk begins with, it says, Vayitzak. V'hareg amru chachamim zuchronam livracha. The Chazal say, Kol hamerim kolo b'tfilato. Harei zeh minivei hasheker. The Gemara in Brachot says that anyone who raises their tefillah, they raises their voice during tefillah, is considered a navi sheker. Right? Oh, so he's got. You're right, exactly. So he says like this. So he says, "Lefi da'atenu kusha meikara leita." According to this question does not even start. Diita betur ba'agat shulchan aruch orech chaim siman kuf aleph. V'im mashmi'a kolo. If someone does raise his voice to make it heard, kedei shelimudu mimenu b'nei beito mutar. Meaning that if a person raises his voice during tefillah in order to teach other people how to daven, what to say, when to say it, etc., then it's okay. You're allowed to do it, right? So the reason why Moshe raised his voice is to teach Bnei Yisrael a lesson about how to daven. It's not that he was trying to raise his voice because he was screaming, but he's getting to a point to say, I want you to learn how to daven. So why did he do it here? Why did this place? There were so many other places where he could have davened in other places. Ela de kasher, lama davka b'pam hazot. Chashav Moshe lelamed liYisrael davar zeh, v'lo b'shar hatfilot she'yitpalel. Right? Why did every other place that Moshe davens, he doesn't do it. He doesn't raise his voice. Yesh lomar da'amrinu b'Yalkut. The Yalkut Shimoni says, mipnei ma lo harich Moshe b'tfilato. Why did Moshe extend, elaborate his tefillah for Miriam? Right? Instead, he kept it to very short. Whether it's 3 words or 5 words, it makes no difference. Kedei shelo yishal omrim b'shvil sheyachoto u'marich ad kan lashano. Right? And specifically here, he had to be short. Because otherwise, if he starts extending his tefillah really long, they're going to be like, oh, it's nepotism, it's his sister. If it's his sister, then he's of course he's going to start going long. But for us, with Israel, he's going to do like, a 5-minute tefillah. And for her, it's going to go 10 minutes, 20 minutes. No, he had to teach them a lesson. So he chose this one specifically to raise his voice, to teach them a lesson. Now what does he say? And then, of course, now we can understand that all other tefillot that Moshe daven, he had to pray. He had to daven quietly. Kidin chovat tefillah, right? As we know that's the halacha. And if you would daven out loud in any one of those other times, in order for them to teach. If he would have done it in any other one of the places where he would have said that you have to say a few words of praise or a few words of thanks beforehand, that maybe they would make a mistake. That they could actually learn. They could actually daven out loud. He was forced to pray out loud in order to be because he had another reason. The other reason is to teach them to say is here. In any other place, they would have said, listen, then I can learn the lesson that we can scream out loud. But here, because he had a second reason. What's the second reason? That they didn't want to learn from Uriah. He didn't want them to think, oh, because it's his sister, that he's going to daven much longer. Right? So he had a reason. So now he says, once he has that reason, he can then jump around and say, I'm going to teach you what you can't do. Meaning, he's using the Miriam piece to explain another piece. Now he says, and he is forced to daven out loud. Right? In order for to tell, we're not suspect of him of favoritism and saying, oh, this is because he's davening long davening because of his sister. Mishum hachi chashav lamed derech eretz v'lo chashav shitu yisrael amar shemutar litpal b'koram deshani hacha dika tamad dechashad. So he says that in this instance he was not concerned that people would say, oh, that you're allowed to daven out loud because there was another reason, meaning there was 2 things going on. One is he's concerned that they're going to say that it's okay to scream out loud, but he says, wait a minute, I have to also explain that, and do I also have a problem that they're going to think that if I'm davening quietly for a long time, they're going to think that maybe it's okay because they're going to say, oh, it's his sister, so he's going to daven extra long. So he says, no, in this case specifically, I'm going to raise my voice, show them what not to do during tefillah, and say I'm going to keep it short, so that when I keep it short, they're going to say, oh, it's not because there's no reason because of Miriam, it's not his sister anymore. He's going to take this and make it as a case to show what you really should be doing. But you shouldn't daven out loud, and you should keep it short. That's what he's saying here. Right now,
sounds like hollow when everybody yells out.
Right, exactly. And now he says that now that Moshe used this opportunity to teach Bnei Yisrael a lesson, which is also something to teach us about how Moshe always is thinking about how can I teach Bnei Yisrael lessons all the time, which is an important thing about in general. So now he explains why these circumstances make it appropriate for Hashem to ask. Now we have to still go back to the questions. Why is it okay for Moshe to ask the question, tell me if you're going to answer her my tefillah or not? So now he says, let's say, maybe we should say that Bnei Yisrael won't understand Moshe's thought process. And they would still get mistake. Maybe they'll say, Moshe screamed out loud here. They won't understand that Moshe was trying to teach a lesson, right? That's a good thing. Right? There's a lot of teachers who think they're doing the right thing, but they don't realize that the kids understand it differently. The kids understand it the opposite, right? Right? So that's why Moshe says to them here, says to Hashem here, tell me whether you're going to answer me or not. Because if I'm going to answer, why? Klomar, אני יודע שהתפללתי שלא קראו לפי שהתפללתי בקול, אבל סבור הייתי שהותר לי מפני החשד, ואם טעיתי, השיבני מעתה מרפא אותה עם לאו, שאז אחזור להתפלל בלחש כדין חובת התפילה. So what is he saying? He's saying tell me, why does Moshe ask the question here? He says, I know that I'm doing something that's out of my normal process. I know that I'm not allowed to scream during davening. I'm doing it because I'm concerned that Bnei Israel might suspect that I'm doing something because of my sister. And therefore I'm doing it differently. Tell me that. And that's why he says, in this case, why Rashi says, Hashem, I want to know whether you're going to answer my tefillah or not. Because if I'm doing something that's out of the ordinary, and I'm trying to teach a lesson, and they still don't understand, and I'm not going to be answered, then I'm going to go back to my regular course of tefillah, which is quiet. Now, I think he said only once. Right, that's right, that's true.
וגם עוד דבר, פעמיים רפא נעלה, זה גימטריה מרים בת שוכנת.
There you go.
Miriam Yocheved,
Yeah, there you go. Now we understand why Rashi explains and reverses the order. The Faresh Bilat Lemor, Achar El Nerfan, right? Rashi, Shar Bilat Lemor, right? The very fact that there is the word Lemor and its meaning that Hashem should tell him whether he accepted the tefillah or not. Right? So the Jewish people were therefore, Bnei Yisrael were therefore saved from the mistake, and they learned what it means. So therefore, Rashi explains that first Moshe was teaching Bnei Yisrael a lesson of the order of the tefillah. And then only afterwards he was saying the Lemor was coming to teach us, kind of tell Hashem, I want to know whether what I just did, which is I switched the style of tefillah that I normally do, is it going to work? Or did it work? Because if I want to teach them a lesson, so I have to first, so Rashi understood what was going on, and Rashi switched the order of his Perush in order to tell us that first Moshe was trying to teach a lesson, and then he wanted to know the tefillah, whether his tefillah was going to work. Because if I'm going out of my regular way to scream, then he wants to know whether or not it worked. Because if it didn't work, I want to go back to my regular tefillah. And if you explain, had Rashi gone in the regular order of the pasuk and explained that first, it would sound like he's doing something that's very not mechubad. Now, we're going to get to what he said, and he says the last part of the pasuk. He says, "V'afshar nami shemilat vayitzak." Right, is also that there's another thing, and he says another perush is the third perush. He says, Milat Vayitzak, lo ba lomar sheitpalel b'kol ram. We understand Vayitzak as that he screamed out loud. Right? We all understand Vayitzak. If I told you Vayitzak right now, what do you mean? Scream out loud. Everyone says that. And he says that maybe it doesn't actually mean that he's cried out loud. Rak sheitpalel mikirot libo. Rather, that he meant to say that he davened from the depths of his heart. The Itab Zar Shmot Daf Yutet Amud Bet. The Zohar Kadosh says in Shmot, there the pasuk talks about Vayishma Hashem et tzakatam, et nakatam, and there's vatal shavatam el Elohim. So there's three different kinds of words to explain the fact that they were screaming. Nachon? So the question is, what's the difference between the three? So the Zohar says, tzaka v'shava b'ma mitparshan. What's the difference between tzaka and shava? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, shava hi b'tfilah davka. Right? Shava is specifically about tfilah, that what we do during davening. Kedichtiv shima tfilati Hashem v'shavati azina. Right? The pasuk in Tehillim, Daf Lamed Tet says, Hashem, hear my tefillah, listen to my crying. Tzaka shetzoek ve'eno omer klum. Right? I scream, but I don't say anything. Right? When I scream, what happens when I don't say anything?
Like a silent
There's
scream.
a silent scream, right? Like when we daven, or when we get angry, or when we want something, sometimes you can't even put it in words. You're so angry, you want to say something out loud, but you don't know what. You don't even have to.
Soul screaming, but your body can be mute.
Rav Kook says that our soul is always davening. Right? Rav Kook says our soul is always davening.
It's like a fire flame; it never stops.
Right, never. But what happens is our words sort of try to put into channel our what was really going on, the neshama that's really davening. So here he's saying the same thing. He's saying is the tzaka is the tefillah that has no words.
This resolves the kushia also of the lemor and the vaitzak.
He's about to say
That's
it.
physically how come.
Right, exactly. He says here, ve'no omer klum. Right, he didn't say anything. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, hilkach gedolat tzaka miklam. Therefore, tzaka is greater, and that's what happens. Mordecai, vayizak tzaka gedolah mara. Mordecai does it, and Esav does it. Esav also does it, right? Esav also does it, right? The tzaka it's not that, right, but the tzaka was that no words. It's greater than words.
Probably with Esav was.
Yeah. Anyway, so he says here, Yidolat tzaka mikulam, the tzaka hi balev. The tzaka is actually in the heart. Hadahu dichtiv tza'ak libam el Hashem. As it says in Echa, their hearts cried out to Hashem. Vayin sham. V'fi zeh yesh lomar, shemitchilat tza'ak Moshe b'libo el Hashem. First, Moshe cried out inwardly in Hashem, right? He sees Miriam. You can imagine the situation. He sees Miriam with Sarah. He's all nervous. He's scared. He wants her to be filled. So he's in his heart. He's filled with tefillah. He's screaming to Hashem, please, please, but please. And then and then he prays. Then he davens for a few words. And then we can understand how everything gets resolved. Vayitzak was not that he acted, because then Vayitzak and Limor, two separate things. So he's saying is Vayitzak, the tzaka was inside, and the Limor is, here's what he actually said. Right now, he said 5 words or 3 words, but his tefillah was the tefillah of what he actually said and what was going on was 2 separate things. So the tzaka is this powerful tefillah that's inside. And by the way, that's what happens. What do we know about, not connected to this, but it's sort of, Rosh Hashanah, what do we know? The shofar is the tefillah without words. Right? It's the same thing. It's coming from our heart. And in fact, I think it's also Rav Kook. Right, I think it's Rav Kook who's I think it's Rav Kook, but I'm pretty sure it's him. He says, is it Rav Kook? I don't remember if it's Rav Kook, but there is someone who says that the tefillah of Rosh Hashanah, the tefillah of the shofar, is so strong, it's better for us to say without words. Because the words, the mouth that we use to say Lashon Hara and say dvarim that are not nice, how could we have the chutzpah? Once a year we have no chutzpah. We say we daven without any chutzpah. But we ask Hashem, like it's like in kategor says sadigor. Right? How could we use the mouth that we're asking Hashem, please make us better, do tshuva with the same mouth that we just did a sin with. So he's saying with the shofar. So here he's saying is the tzaka, the real tzaka. And by the way, that's one vanitzaka l'Hashem. Right? That's why the vanitzaka l'Hashem. That's the one that gets. That's what gets switches us. That's the switch from when we get to vanitzaka l'Hashem. That's when Hashem turns his mind and switches his decision. So here, the whole idea here is that Moshe, the tzaka that we see is a very powerful tefillah that has no words. It's coming from the heart, and then the tefillah itself is actually very short. Eli, can I stop it?
Yeah, a minute.
Okay.
Carry on.
You also see
I was going to switch it to Hebrew. That's why.
Oh,
So
You also see about Yosef.
Yeah.
I think there was like a famous video of when they'd seen Yechi Adonenu.
yeah.
I think the video's on YouTube. Anyways, so he would be sick. He'd be saying a quiet tefillah.
So instead,
What is it?
He was saying a quiet tefillah.
Quiet.
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 Why?
B'sheket.
Me,
Why?
Rebbe?
No.
No,
Avad
Avad
Yosef.
Yosef.
Why was it? Why?
מה אומר?
Yehi Adonenu?
No.
אני שמעתי חייאת
מה
רפואה.
עובדיה יוסף?
אז מחילה.
לא, לא, לא,
I didn't
שמעת
understand.
על זה. That
What
he
is it?
should live long and forever. But there's a video on YouTube of him saying tefillah. Of him saying that tefillah, and but in quietness. And everybody around him was singing Yechi Adonim.
וואו.
So the idea here is that
Not the Chabad one.
anyways, so he's saying so what we learn from here is that there are a few things. One is that first of all, Rashi understood something that we didn't understand, that we all thought that tefillah El Narafanala is one tefillah. It's actually a shorter tefillah than we thought. We also learned that when we do daven, when we do say something to Hashem, we should make sure to introduce it correctly, and we should make sure to put it in the right framework. And finally, we learn that the tza'akah, that sometimes when we can't put into words what our heart is really telling us to do, is just scream from the heart. And then, that's what he's saying. So he says here that sometimes we have to do is the tza'akah is what really needs to be done, and that's, by the way, when we go to when sometimes you go to tefillot, go to funerals, or you go to places, there are certain people who scream at the top. They scream at the top of the lungs. They say no words. Breslov does it a lot. They find these eight ratzon and they just scream.
Shuka,
right. So that's the whole point.
And they're spotted this as well.
Right. So the tzaka that they're doing is the tzaka is coming from the heart, and they have nothing. There are no words. So they just use their mouth. They just use what's coming out of their heart as a way to.
It's like tefillah lani. It's the tefillah.
Right. Exactly. Coming that also the same kind of thing. A person tefillah lani kiyato.
דברי שאגתי כתוב.
Right. Exactly. Dvei sha'agati. The question is why was not? It's not sha'aga. Sha'aga or tzaka. Exactly. Baruch Adonai Olam Amen. Shkoyach.